the better way for you. And so that's something that you have to decide. It's really important that you have your plan. And the question is, does your plan meet the needs in a faithful way? Are you thinking that we need to get back in because there's a loss of income and we need to make money quickly by bringing people back into the building? Well, is that faithful to keeping people safe, which is the first thing that we talked about, the right to worship and enter our buildings versus the responsibility to protect people and protect the vulnerable? So these are things we have to weigh out. What is the impact on those who are vulnerable? So remember, when you're looking at coming back into the building, who will be there? What is the activity that you're going to be hosting in the building? And who are the vulnerable people that are there? And is it better to do it in a different way, or is it safe to have people gather in the church? Those are things to think about. When it comes to church, we talked about today that we had our staff leaders gathering today, and one of the things that was talked about was in some of our churches, summertime activities mean that the church slows down a little bit. So is it now that we need to be entering our churches, or can we wait until the fall and then we get to see what is happening as other entities begin to open up and how that's going before we then move into our buildings? So is that something that you think you can do, or is it that your summer activities are such that you need to go in? When Dr. Strain was speaking to us, he said that there are some core items that have to go across every stage of any of the plans that we have and any of the stages that the government has put in. So still always physical distancing, still always increased environmental cleaning, so the cleaning of your building, still always good hygiene, so hand hygiene. When you're coughing, cough into your elbow, or put your tissue and put your tissue right away into a garbage receptacle and not use the same tissue over and over again. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, those types of things. Have hand sanitizer. Those are the pieces that are going to be with us for a very long time, and it probably have been with us since we've been children, when our parents told us to go wash our hands. So we need to keep doing that, and we need to make sure that our churches have a place for people to do that when they come into the building. Really important to stay home and stay away from others, even if there's only one symptom. You wake up and you have a sore throat. Oh, I have a sore throat. Then please don't go and be around people if your church is open, even for a small group. Please don't. We need to remember that we are not operating as normal, and we will not be operating as normal at what we used to be for a very long time. And some of the experts are telling us that it's going to be about 1 to 2 years before we're able to do that. And so we need to always remember that these core items are going to be part of us for a very long time. And it depends, might be a bit of a roller coaster, because there may be times as we're beginning to open up and then something happens that there's maybe another cluster of people who get sick, and we're asked then to slow down on our activities. And so it might be a bit of a roller coaster for us. And we have to pay attention always to what the health authorities are telling us. And if they slow us down, then we have to slow down. Thanks, David. Next one. So the plan. So someone asked me, when can we start going into our buildings, following, of course, the regulations that the healthcares have in place and the limitations that we have. One of the things that people asked was, can we go in? When can we go in? And the answer is you cannot go in until you have your plan in place, written, your congregation is aware of it, and you can post it up and you can give it to any group that might be coming into your church so that they know what the plan is. So that's really, really important. So David said that there are some requests in the chat asking, can I make the PowerPoint available? Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. We'll do that. When you're looking at putting together your plan, make sure that you look at what your activities are, who your demographic is, and what and make sure that your plan is fitting the needs of your church. Some churches are bigger, some are smaller. Some can accommodate 10 people, and that would be your regular congregation. You got to make sure, of course, that you can go in and make sure people can come into the church and leave the church without crossing each other, and making sure that people can sit down and social or be physically distant from each other. All those things need to be part of your plan. And so it'll be different for everybody, and people may need to, different churches will do different things. So here's the other thing to remember. Just because your neighbor down the road is doing something doesn't mean that you have to, and don't feel that pressure. If you've decided that it's not right for you right now and you want to wait until September before you do that, then you do that. If you feel like the time is right for you right now, then, and that you want to begin having small meetings in your church just to see how it goes, and if your cleaning and everything is working, your plan is working, then do that. And the one thing that I would, I guess, ask that of all of us is that we not judge each other on the decisions that we've made. The only judgment we need to make on ourselves is, are we doing this faithfully and to the best of our ability? Are we following the health guidelines? And are we doing what is right for our congregation? And so please, 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 let's be kind to each other in this, because we're going to be at different places. Why do we need a plan? Well, there's a few different reasons why we need a plan. Number one is that it gives our congregations the security that you have as an official board or a governing body or an emergency planning team, that you've taken your time to look at all of these pieces, that you care about them coming back, you care about their safety, and you're able to say, we have done everything we can to put our plan in place to the best of our ability, and here it is, and it needs to be shared with your congregation so that they're aware, and with any group that's coming into your church. Another piece around that is, if for some reason we're asked, if someone, for example, if somebody decides that they're going to put a complaint in, because sometimes people do that, about some activity that you're having, if you can show this is our plan, and we have done this to the best of our ability, and we are adhering to our plan, and everybody's informed of our plan, then you've done your due diligence. And that helps with if there's a complaint. And if someone from the health department comes to have a look, they know that you've done your due diligence, and that goes a long way for everyone. That's another reason. Another reason for that, of course, is with our insurance companies. The insurance companies have said that their main interest is that we follow the government and public health authorities' information. They will be asking us that. But if you have your plan that follows that, and you're able to show that to them, then that's another reason why you need to have a plan. And one of the other pieces that they want to know is that we're following the plan in a disciplined fashion. So that's another reason why it's really important to have our plan ready. And of course, at the bottom, out of all of that, it's also really important because we want to make sure that we are doing everything to keep people safe, because we don't want to be in a place where we can say, oh yes, well, we didn't really put a plan in place and someone's gotten sick, and then just how that would feel for all of us. It's also, I remember there was a statement that somebody had made that we don't want to be the congregation who ends up having someone who is sick in our midst and spreading that within our congregation because we didn't have a good plan in place. Can we mitigate all risk? Absolutely not. Can we do the best that we can and be able to show that? Absolutely. And so that's what we're about. If your staff are going to be going back into the building and your offices are going to be open, then your staff need to know the plan as well. They need to be well informed, and it would be good for the M&P committee, as we talked about here, to meet with all staff and to make sure that they're feeling okay, that they're okay with the going back in the building. If they have some vulnerabilities, then it might be good to come up with a different plan for them. If they have somebody at home that's vulnerable, then maybe a different plan for them in the interim as we begin to go back into the buildings. Hey, David. somebody had something up about keeping a list of who's in the building. So one of the questions that I had about that was, why do we have to keep a list? And of course, we know that one of the big pieces around flattening the curve, if an incident happens, is being able to contact the people that were in the building who may have been exposed and get to them quickly and ask them to self-isolate. And that's a really, so it's identifying that somebody is sick by testing, but the next piece around flattening the curve is making sure that you can do the contact tracing and get people to isolate so that it's not being spread in the community. And I noted that in some, sometimes you'll go on the website for the healthcare government website, and it'll say, if you have been in this date and this date at Walmart, you may have been exposed. Well, if we have a list of who is there, we don't have to do that. We know who's there, and the health authorities can call everybody. And so that's the reason why we want to have lists of people, so that we can easily do that. Another way of trying to be good citizens and to keep the curve flattening. Some people were asking for a little more information after the document went out, so we've changed that, and we've put up the Canadian government website, which gives a list of the disinfectants that are safe to use. And so if you click on that, you will see a whole list of them. And some people said that they would prefer not to use Lysol wipes that can be put into a landfill, because they are made with a plastic byproduct. So using paper towels and a spray disinfectant might be a better option. So if you can do that, then that's great. If you can't, then you can look at different options there for you. I noted that Spray 9 was on there, which was interesting. So so that's so there's all different options there for you. And so that one is we've put it in here, and we're posting it tomorrow in the new document if you want it, and you'll also get a copy of this PowerPoint, so you'll have it as well. So there was a question that came after the General Council had their gathering last week, and it was that someone had said that the virus only lasts for 72 hours on surfaces. So if you have church and everybody goes home, then you close the doors and nobody comes back till next week. Can we avoid cleaning? And so, no, we can't avoid cleaning. We don't want to be questioned at the end of the day if something happens, say, yeah, well, we didn't clean because we didn't think we had to. And even though 72 hours seems to be for some surfaces safe, it might not be for all. And it's best after every event to clean the church thoroughly. Another question that came was around washrooms, and how often does washrooms need to be cleaned? Do they have to be cleaned after each person goes in? Does somebody have to go in behind and then clean? And so what we've gleaned is that washrooms need to be cleaned after each event. And in your bathroom, you should have a hand washing sign that asks people to wash their hands before and after using the washroom, and how to wash your hands. And you can get some of those posters on the website from the government website, which teaches people how to do that. And then after each event, make sure that the washroom is cleaned. And of course, as we talked about before, the frequently touched surfaces needs to be cleaned after each event. And then if people are coming, if your staff are coming into the office, then there's some pieces there to be aware of. So when staff come in, they should be physically distancing, even when they're working in the building, when they have their breaks, a coffee break, or if they eat their meal at the church, to make sure that they're distanced. The area where the staff is eating needs to be cleaned down. So like the table, the fridge, the microwave, anything that's used should be cleaned down after each time it's being used. Okay, David. And any tools or devices that's used in the office, even just if you're using the photocopier and you're pressing the buttons, it should be wiped down at the end of each day. Or if you have 2 or 3 of you doing that, just wipe it down after you use it, so the next person is safe, and then they wipe it down after they use it. It's really important that our churches have water and soap for washing hands, and if not, because I know some of our churches may not have washrooms, so it's really important that you have hand sanitizer or a hydroalcoholic solution, and it has to be 60% alcohol in it. And of course, again, hygiene rules need to be posted and observed. Some questions have come about tenants and rental space. And one of the questions which I don't have an answer for right now, maybe one of you do when we go into our small groups, is right now, if we have our regulations that only 10 people can enter a building, can we at this point allow our tenants to go in? Because we know that some offices are, some businesses are opening up to outside groups, and some restaurants, and they have strict regulations they have to abide by. So that's one question that I don't have the answer for right now. I did put in a call to Dr. Strang's office to see if we can get the answer, and hopefully I'll have it within a couple days and I'll be able to give that to you. But it's important to follow the health regulations as it is. Right now, we know that we can only have 10 people in our buildings. So that's a caution right now when we talk about allowing our tenants to come in. We know that it's important to us because having our tenants, they bring in some income. And for those that don't bring in income, they're part of who we are as a church and part of our outreach. And so we know that we're longing to be able to have them come in as well. But again, we want you to take your time with that too. And we have to look at it case by case. And your tenants have to know what your plan is, and your tenants need to be able to submit to you their plan on how they're going to keep safe. So for example, if daycares are permitted to open and your church is one who normally would have a daycare, there are strict regulations around daycares. So if you're permitted to have the daycare in your church, and we get that answer, if it's more than 10 people, then you would need to make sure that they know your plan, and they would have to present you with their plan so that you as a church would know that they also have a plan on how they're going to protect their tenants, but also that protects you as well. The cleaning is usually the responsibility of the landlord, which is us as churches. And so that's another conversation to have with your tenant around the cleaning. And one of the things that you need to think about is, if we're going to have to clean more often, is it going to cost us more money to do that? Because if you have a group that's using your church right after they're gone, you have to go in and clean, or have a cleaning company do that for you. So is that going to cost you more? Is it going to cost you more for your caretaker? And I know some congregations have had to lay off their caretakers, but if we go into this, you're going to have to think about having them come back. If you have volunteers that are doing it, you want to make sure your volunteers are safe and that they have gloves and masks when they're in cleaning. That's really important. So some things to think about: the cost and the income. Again, important to have conversations with the tenant. There was somebody on last week on the webinar that the United Church had, who was a lawyer, and she talked about the usage terms with your tenants and the dollar terms with your tenants. And sometimes you can't change the dollar terms that you've agreed to because your agreement is still in place. But some of the questions around that would be usage terms. So one group told me that an agreement that they have with a daycare that's now coming into their building is that they're going to do the lawn care, and that will help then with the churches being able to have some extra money to do the cleaning afterwards. So there may be those kinds of agreements that you can come up with your rental group. And lots of times churches have a really good relationship with those that rent their buildings. So something to think about. So we talked about the daycares. We talked about, in your plan, if there is a tenant that comes in, when you're allowed to, make sure that to talk about what portion of the building they have to use. So if they can use the gym part of your building, then it'd be good to have them only in the gym part, and have as a part of the agreement of them coming into your building, that they're not going to be around the other parts of the building. They're going to stay in the part that they are supposed to be using, because that's really important. Because if someone comes in and cleans only the gym where a tenant is using it and those washrooms, but there's been people all over the building, then we have jeopardized people by not knowing that. So that's really important. One of the questions that came up recently with the General Counsel webinar was, what about if our tenant doesn't adhere to the rules? And so Cynthia Gunn had written a piece for us on that. So she says, although the laws vary from province to province, it's unlikely a building will be closed because of the actions of one tenant. The legal consequences would be for the tenant. The people actually breaking the rules, for example, the tenant may be charged, fined, and or ordered to cease operations at the premises, but that shouldn't affect the operations of other tenants in your building or the building owner if they are complying with the restrictions. And again, you can show that you have your plan and that you are adhering to the plan and that you've given your plan to the tenants and that you have asked them to adhere to it as well. She says, even so, if a tenant is breaking provincial rules, the congregation has an obligation to take action to protect the health and safety of other tenants, as well as members and staff of the congregation. And so I guess we can't just turn away from it and pretend we don't know that that's happening, right? So that would be a conversation with your tenant, even if they haven't been caught or fined, but for us to make sure that they are following the rules as well, so we can keep everybody safe. David. Another question that's come up is around pastoral care. And so the question was, can we do in-person pastoral care? So we had a discussion about that today in our staff leaders gathering and what others are doing across the country. And one of the things that we're recommending is that at this point still that we not do in-person pastoral care. Somebody asked, well, can I go to people's houses and just me stay in the driveway and have them in the door of their house or them on their back deck and me down from that? But so one of the things that we're asked to do, of course, is to keep the exposure, keep our contacts low, so we don't, so that we're not in contact with a bunch of people and then we can't say where we've been and who we've been with, right? And so we recommend right now that only if absolutely necessary that there be an in-person pastoral care, because we have to balance the need. Is it a need? And if it's an absolute need, then yes, but make sure you're protected. Is it I prefer to meet in person or I want to meet in person? Well, the preference and the wants we sort of have to put aside right now, and make sure that we look at just most importantly the need. Is this a person's end of life? Can we go in and be with them? We can if we're safe, and if the institution that they're in says that you are permitted to go in. So there are also the regulations that we have to use. Ministry with children and youth. So I know that some day camps are able to be open, and I know some of our congregations like to have their vacation Bible school in the summer and some day camps in the church. So again, one of the pieces around that is Dr. Strang said, well, talk to others, talk to the daycares in your community, see what they're doing in order to keep children and youth safe if they're having gatherings. If you can, as our church has been modeling, if you can do your youth forums online, and you can do your VBS online, and you can do your youth groups online, and your Sunday schools online, then maybe that's something to think about for this summer in particular, because it's hard to keep children socially distanced. It's harder to keep them safe when they're in an area together. So that might be something you want to consider, reconsider, and maybe have a conversation with our children, youth, and young adult minister as well, if you're thinking about doing that. I think Catherine's on. I thought I saw Catherine was on here tonight, so she certainly would be open to working with you through that and to helping you to talk it out, to decide what might be best. Okay, David. What we thought we would do now is have people go into small groups, so put you into chat rooms. And in the chat room, we would ask you to have some conversation about where you're at right now. What your group, what your congregation is doing. Do you have your plan in place? What might that look like? And what are some questions you want to bring back to the full group? Something that we haven't discussed so far tonight, and that would be of benefit for the full group to hear the question and get the answer.
How many in each group do you think, Faith?
How many do we have? 160?
Yeah, I've got 32 rooms at 4 to 5 per room at this moment.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay. All right. And how long again will we give them?
About 20 minutes.
Okay. So ready to go? Maybe just repeat the question one more time, Faith.
Okay. So what is your congregation doing right now? Do you have your plan in place? What are some things you've learned while you're putting that together? And what are the questions that you have that would benefit the whole group hearing?
Let me just say I've noted a few of the questions that have been showing up in the chat. So we won't lose those necessarily, but talk about those in your small group as well, and then come back prepared to ask them again. All right, here we go.
I can see you on my screen.
Good. Okay. Welcome back. Good. So we've got 32 breakout rooms. So we're going to ask you one group at a time to give us one of your questions. Please do not report on all of your questions. Ask us one of your questions, and then we'll move on to the next group. And by the time we get to the 32nd group, if all of the questions have not been asked, we'll start again at group number 1 and see if there's anything left. And do listen carefully and try hard not to repeat yourselves. If the question has already been asked, don't feel like you have to ask it again. And if all of your questions have been asked, I'm really sorry that you're going to miss your chance to ask one, but just take comfort in knowing you're at least as smart as the rest of the people here. And we'll move on to the next questions as they come. So breakout room number 1, Diane Kempt, Peter Anthony, Linda Stonehouse, Murdoch McDonald, and Penny Nelson. Whoever of you is the one who's going to be asking your question, please unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yeah, we're wondering if we can do outside small group ministries of 10 people or less physically distant, even if we're not able to get into our buildings yet.
That is a good question, because we have been told that for outside and inside, it can be 10 people. And so I would say yes, if you can follow all the regulations, you could do that.
So keep your distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, all those good stuff.
And the thing to think about, Penny, is the washrooms. So if you're going to have something outside, is there a washroom available, and do you have the cleaning put in place before you do that? Or you need to let people know that there is no washroom available before they come, so they can make their decision if they can or not.
All right, thank you. Group number 2 was Bill Gibson, Lydia Thompson, Sandra Matchett. So the one of you who's to speak, would you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Just mostly questions around finances and people's creativity in generating financial support while the COVID experience has been on, and just wondering what the wisdom out there is.
I've heard some creativity around fundraisers. Talking to a congregation who did a virtual afternoon tea And so they asked people to donate and then send their pictures in of them sitting down having an afternoon tea and a biscuit or something. And I think they raised $1,500 in an afternoon. And it
Wow.
didn't take anything, really. Just please send in your picture, pay us to see your picture.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Somebody says a bakeless bake sale. So one of the things that might be really cool to do is to share those ideas around with each other. And if you don't mind sending them all to David, your ideas, online auctions, we've heard of all kinds of stuff like that. Be good to have a list around so it'll germinate something for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yes, by all means send them to me, but even better would be post it to the Region 15 Facebook page.
True.
And then I don't have to do it. So thank you very much. Breakout group 3, Betty Kemp, Catherine, Ed McCauley, Heather Ferrier, Jackie Clark. Would one of you please share your question with us?
I'll jump in. The question we were most keen to think about was, what do we do about congregants who do not follow the plan, especially if it is repeatedly?
We had that discussion at the town hall meeting in First on Eastern Edge. And again, it's a hard one, right? Because we don't want to hurt somebody, but at the same time, if someone continuously doesn't adhere to the regulations, then they're hurting everybody. And so it really is a deep conversation with that person. And sometimes when we put it into the terms of, you might be okay, but you don't know about others and their vulnerabilities, then that might, if you put it into terms of they're protecting other people, it might help. It might not. And there may come a time you have to say, if you can't do that, then perhaps you can't come yet.
Thank you.
More important, if I can just interrupt, is who has to be the bad guy?
I know.
Or who's the bad guy?
That's a really good question to ask in
Yeah.
terms of your plan.
Yes.
Who are the assigned people to remind people of the agreed upon plan? You know, is it going to be your trustees? Is it going to be your elders? It's going to be the board members. So give that some thought.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Group 3. This is group 4. Art, John Amanalda Parsons, Mary Lou Isaacs, Ron Cochran, Sam Schwartz. Room 4. Did you have a question? One of you can unmute and offer that, please.
It's Ron Cochran. I don't know that we actually arrived at a consensus on what a question was, but one of our last pieces of our conversation was related to just the previous conversation about numbers. And if we get to, the province gets us to a point where we're comfortable with perhaps relaunching, say at 25, and we have 26 to 28 show up, we're going to have to do some pretty close monitoring of how many we've got in the sanctuary at any one time. So we'll have another tough call, and I think it might be a different number for each of us because we've some bigger churches in our conversation than smaller ones. But it's just, I think we recognize we're going to have to.
Yes, because when you go in and you measure out your sanctuary and just get a sense of how many you can accommodate with the physical distancing, and then as your numbers grow, you'll know, how many you can actually accommodate. But it is going to be difficult to be turning people away, but we have to adhere to the regulations.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Breakout room 5, Helen Dixon, Jen Roberts, Marilyn White, Mindy Vinkfist, Timchuk. One of you mute and ask your question.
I don't think we actually developed a question, but Faith was in the group. Let's put the pressure on Faith.
Thanks, Mindy. We did talk about whether the plan had to be approved by anybody outside of the governing body of the congregation. And what we have said is that if you feel more comfortable having the region look at your plan, then please send it along. It's not necessary for it to be approved by the region, but we are there if you need us and feel that and if you would feel more comfortable having us do that. There was some conversation originally that they would all go to the health authorities, but they don't have the capacity to look at all of the plans of all of the groups that will be meeting. So we are there to help you if you do want your plan looked at, but we don't have to approve it.
Thank you. Group 6, Corrine, Jack, Jim, Nick, and Paula.
I don't know that we actually had a question either, so unless someone else in the group wants to jump in, I don't think we had much to add.
We talked about one thing about, hibernating a building, especially if that building happens to have an organ. And Nick, I think you said something about that. I think that would be an interesting point.
Yeah, we're floating the possibility that we may not be in the church for nearly another year. So we actually did talk about hibernating and sealing the building, which would mean turning off heat and what impact it might have in the organ. We talked with an expert and they indicated that the freezing of the organ is not the problem, it's the thawing out where damage can occur. So if you are considering that with an organ, just be careful how quickly it reheats and thaws out, because that's where the damage can occur.
So good to research all aspects of your plan and consult with experts to make sure that you've got good advice on how to address your particular concern. Group number 7, Gary, Heather, Janet, Joyce, and Shirley. Do you have a question or a comment for us?
The only thing that came out of our group, well, there were lots of discussions, but we discussed, somebody asked if the plan needs to be posted in the church, and the consensus was that it probably wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, it's recommended in the document that it'd be good to post it so people can see it, so that they know that you have it, and that, especially if it's not somebody who gets the communication from your congregation and they're in the building, they can see that and know what they have to adhere to.
Group, since we're only at number 8, I'm going to move a little quicker. Be ready to unmute yourself as your group number comes along. Group 8, Doug Hill, Glendon, Jeff, Margaret Ann, Maggie Plant, and Norma Mills.
Yeah, I think our question was primarily around with the plans. Since we're all on our own doing it, if there's beyond the health guidelines, if there's a checklist or the region could provide something that says, remember to think about these things. I think that would be very helpful. As I've been going through it this afternoon, it's easy to miss something. And we're really kind of flying blind thinking, what's this event going to be like, or how do you walk through this? I don't know if the region could help with that, but besides looking at our plans, maybe offering, the 15 things we got to make sure we're checking the box on. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was a question came out last week in the town hall we did in First On as well. Could there be a checklist? So we're going to look at that after the regional meeting on Wednesday, because we're really tied up with that right now. But after that, we'll look at what we can do with putting together a checklist. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, folks. Group number 9, Claire, David, Jim, Linda, and Tony. Who's your speaker?
No question from us.
Fabulous. Thank you. Group 10, Brian, Deirdre, Nancy, Stephen, and Sylvia.
I'm Brian Pugh from St. Luke's in Tantallon, and our question was related to the plans and renters having their plan, and whether we have renters varying from single one-off events, like somebody having a wedding shower, and then we also have people that would normally you would expect to have a plan, people who rent regularly. So I'm wondering if it's practical or possible to have to request people who are having wedding showers to have plans, and whether we should probably think about having something generic made up so that if you're going to have a shower, this is the plan you will follow, and that might be a better path, maybe. So
Yes,
just wondering.
that's a good piece as well. So if it's like a baby shower or something like that, then I would think that you would ask them to follow your plan and make sure that they know what it is, because they wouldn't have their own plan. Not the same as an organized group using the church, for sure.
Group 11, April, Gail, Joyce, and Natalie.
Can you hear me, David?
Yes.
Oh, good. I pushed the right button. We didn't have a question exactly, but one of the things that came out, and certainly I felt it, was I was just totally overwhelmed by all that we had to look at in making a plan. The second thing was that somebody said that it's too bad we didn't have a template that everybody could use. And I said that I thought that power presentation could be a start. That's pretty well all we got around, because we had a lot of interference, so, and noise problems. So.
Thanks, Gail. Faith, any comment on that?
Yeah, it's hard to have a generic plan, but certainly if you had a checklist, or you took the PowerPoint for sure, and you took the document that we had, because every congregation is different. They're different in size, they're different in activities, so it's hard to have a generic plan, but that's why we thought the guidelines might be better.
Thanks. Group number 12, Angela, Helene, Maggie again, Margie, and Sherry.
Helene Burns here. We didn't have a question per se, but we were lamenting not being able to sing in worship.
Yeah.
We see that as being a very painful thing. Someone mentioned better not have the hymn books in the pews because it might be too tempting. But I'm just wondering, are there any guidelines to help us know when we'll be able to sing? Is it possible to sing with masks on? Is there anything we can do? That's just a lament more than anything.
Very much a lament, because singing our faith is very important to us, for sure. But right now, the research says that singing is a super spreader, and so we have to be very careful to not do that. And the question about masks, from what we've been able to find, is that some of the molecules can get outside of the mask, especially when we're singing. Yeah. So we can't, and I know it's hard, and that makes it, I think, a little harder to go back into our churches when we can't do that.
Thank you. Group number 13, Anne, Edwina, Leslie, Louisa, and Sandra.
Hi. Our question was mainly around what is Christmas going to look like in Advent, and what were some alternate activities that could be done that would help us celebrate. We had some talk around outside worship and things like that, and wondering if there might be consideration for another town hall coming on to that time.
Oh, that's a good idea, isn't it, David? I want to say thank you to David for organizing this for us tonight. He called and said, hey, what do you think about doing this? I said, I think we need to do this, and he organized it all, so thank you, David. And I agree, sharing how we're going to do that. I mean, we went into lockdown during one of the most sacred parts of our Christian church year, which was our Lent and Easter. And we managed, and we'll manage through Christmas if we have to, but it'd be great to hear people's stories of how they're looking at doing that.
Group 14, we're almost halfway through. David Lutz, Deanna Prest, Linton Worrell, Roger Kugler, and a telephone number that I didn't get the name for.
Hi, David. We actually have no questions unless the group thought of some while others were speaking. Okay, thank you.
We'll carry on. Something will maybe come up. We'll see. Group 15, Annika, Christine, Heather, Joan, and Kevin. Who's your speaker?
We didn't really have any questions. Kevin did ask about stewardship, and I think someone else kind of already started that topic. So Kevin, if that didn't cover it enough for you, I would encourage you to ask that.
I think Roger had said that he was going to set up some gatherings as well to talk about stewardship pieces. So if you're interested in that, be in touch with Roger Janes.
Thank you. Group 16, Caroline, Roger Moore, Terry Skidmore, and Wendell Brown.
That's me, Terry. And our question was already asked. It was about the numbers and how do you say who's in and who's out. We did feel that offering your services online and in print was good. And we also thought maybe we should be waiting at least until September. Thank you.
Thanks. Group 17, Dennis, Carson, Grant McKenzie, and Terry Hines.
Hi, I'll jump in. It's Terry Hines. We don't really have any questions. We spent a lot of time discussing about, for larger congregations, when you start going back, how are you going to manage it? Because you may end up having multiple services.
Yep, good observation. I heard a story of one congregation that's quite large and sees a large crowd on Christmas Eve and is already thinking about how many Christmas Eve services will it have to hold in order to add up to the 400 they usually get at the one service. So it's going to take some imagination for certain.
And lots of cleaning in between.
Lots of cleaning. Group 18, an unassigned phone number, Donna, Carrie, Leslie, and Stephen. Do you have any comment?
We had an interesting question regarding numbers as well. So the issue was there are some churches that may have multiple large rooms available, and although I guess this may be viewed as not correct, but what if you had the sanctuary, a large chapel, a large parlor, a large auditorium? Can you put 10 people at this point in each of those 4 rooms so that you could actually have 40 people in your church on a Sunday?
So my understanding is if the regulations say 10, it's 10, no matter how many rooms you have. If the regulations say 40, it's 40.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's this week.
Yeah, that's right.
So keep checking the regulations and don't be afraid to contact public health and verify for sure. Breakout room 19, Alan, Audrey, Fred, Lori, and Valerie. Did you have a comment or a question?
So the question that we had was around liability and what liability, if any, do we have as a church, particularly with regards to cleaning or lack thereof. So if, you know, if there's something that happens, that there's a breakout, what liability do we have and how do we prove due diligence? Should volunteers be trained to do the cleaning? Do we have to show that they've been trained? Those kinds of things.
It's a good question. It would be good if you don't have a professional cleaning company and you have volunteers that you do a training with the volunteers. John Chippendale, who a lot of our congregations are with the hub, right? He had a statement that we confirm that insurers' main interest is that procedures outlined by government public health authorities be followed in a disciplined fashion. And that will, so showing that you have a plan, showing that you've been adhering to it will go a long way.
So ultimately, there are issues of liability. We do need to be able to show that we
Yes.
have done due diligence.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
As always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Group 20, Dawn, Duncan, Marie, Ross, and Sharon.
I'll jump in if that's okay. I don't know if we really had specific questions from the group, but can I ask a follow-up question to that last question? And that is, if we instruct them on how to do it, can we have the user groups themselves clean up after themselves? Can we require them to wipe all the surfaces down? Or do we have to have either someone from the church or a professional do that?
Yeah, that was a question that came up, and I can't answer it clearly for you, other than how would we be able to be sure that the user groups have done the due diligence that you would do as a church when you're cleaning? That would be the only question that I would have.
Because ultimately our trustees will be the ones held accountable.
Yes, yeah. So you can't say, well, we asked that group to clean up after themselves and they didn't, right?
If we have signed contracts with a lot of the user groups, though, if it's signed in the contract that they have to do this, is that?
That's a good question. And I'll have to get the answer for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Group 21, Arthur, Catherine, Donnie, Joan, and Sheila.
Well, we didn't designate anybody to speak, but a question I have that I brought up at the group is, now that restaurants are open, do you think there will be a time when we can have meals for fundraising where we can space the tables and have people come in and have a meal?
Well,
Interesting idea.
Yeah, that would be the hope, of course, that we might eventually get to that point. But of course, there's really strict regulations around how meals are prepared within restaurants and the social distancing within restaurants. So they're at half their capacity, but there may come a time when we can do that. It's not right now, but there may come a time when we can do that.
Are you good enough tippers that they'll give up the other customers in order to host you?
Maybe not good enough cooks.
I received a message from Group 22 that they have no question for us. So we're going on to 23. I hope you're still feeling okay with that declaration. Group 23, Alicia, Gary, Roseanne, and Sally.
I don't know if we had a question, but I did want to mention something that Dr. Strang referred to in his presentation. He recommended the document by the province of Alberta called Guidance for Places of Worship. And he said he liked it the best of all of them. And if people are looking for a resource to use as sort of a checklist, these are the things that we can be considering when we're making our plan. I do think it's helpful for that. So I just wanted to pass that little piece of information on.
Awesome. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, Group 23. Group 24, Brenda, Faye, Peter, and Wayne.
Good conversation, no question.
Very good, thanks. Group 25, Jeff, Gordon, Sean, Shauna, and Vivian. I know sometimes it can take a little while to get the mute button figured out, so I'm not going to rush yet, just checking.
Hello, David. I think the only question we had that hasn't been asked already is just regarding how the sanitation protocols would go around things like pew cushions, as we can envision how we're going to wipe down, tables and pews and all the other stuff, but wasn't quite sure how to do that.
Sean, I just heard about a product that's being offered here in Newfoundland. So I was going to do some more research, and it's actually a spray. I don't know how much it costs or anything. I was just told about it last couple of days, and you can, for fabrics, for all of your church areas, you can spray it, and it does sanitize the way that it's supposed to. And for fabrics, it just takes longer, but once it dries, then it's sanitized. And so I need to do a little bit more research on that. So it's a spray piece. So I know we've seen in when we're watching the news these the spray that happens in different places to sanitize the areas. So this is a little one that you can use, and businesses are buying them. And so I don't know the cost. I don't know how we would do it. It's sensitive, so if you have allergies, it doesn't affect you for allergies. So I'm just learning that this is a possibility, and I don't know anything more about it than that. But certainly fabrics, if you have, some of our congregations talked about that, and they have fabric on their pews, and so they said when they open, they're just going to use chairs and meet in their church hall until they can figure out a way to be able to sanitize their fabric pews. So that's a concern.
Make a quick suggestion. Maybe if you were to contact a professional cleaning company in the area, because any professional cleaning company that has large contracts has probably already had to look into sanitation protocols for different surfaces like fabrics, and they might have a suggestion for products too.
Good idea, Mindy. Yeah.
Thanks, Mindy. Faith, just a couple of comments in the chat. One is if the pew cushions are removable, please remove them. I would say if you really need a cushion, bring your own. But further to the spray you were talking about, I just had my car serviced, and when I arrived to pick it up, they had not yet sanitized it. So I thought, oh great, another 20 minutes. And no, I just stood back for a half a second, and they went shh, and sprayed the stuff into the car, and there it was, sanitized. So I think the spray you're talking about that can work on soft surfaces is something that is in use at least at car dealerships, if nowhere else. All right, thanks, folks. Group 20. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was saying that's good. It's good to learn about those things because it will make cleaning a lot easier if they're not too expensive for us.
Yeah. Group 26. Carolyn, Joyce, and Natalie Buchanan again.
Hi, it's Carolyn. I don't think we had a specific question, but I know Natalie had thrown out some figures with regards to measurements of some churches have taken, just to see how many people they can let into their church when the 6 foot distancing is in effect. And Natalie, I hope I don't put you on the spot, but could you throw a couple of those figures out there just to let, I know it set me back to find out how few could be let back in, and I was wondering if you might throw those out to anybody else who hasn't given it any thought yet. Natalie's in by phone, I think, so I don't know if she has to be unmuted or.
Okay, let me see if I can find her.
She can press *6 to unmute herself.
Aha. Did you hear that, Natalie? *6.
Hello. Sorry.
There you are.
I was pushing the number sign instead of the star sign. You know, Valerie Kingsbury had said in one of the Zoom meetings, and I think I saw it up on the chat here this evening as well, that they had measured First United, and perhaps Valerie would like to speak to that, that they had measured First United in the lower part of the building. We all know how huge First United is, or I'm assuming most of us might know. She had said that physically distancing, maintaining the 2 feet or the 2 meters and 6 feet, that they could fit 42 people. And I had mentioned about the Knoll Church, one of the points that I serve seats about 100 to 120 people, and we figure in a church that size and the way the pews are set up, etc., that we'd be looking at about a dozen.
Yeah, when you do the measuring, hey, it just brings that stark reality of how many we can actually have in our buildings.
Could I ask a question on that? If you have family bubbles, so a family comes and they sit elbow to elbow in a pew, don't they? And if a lot of families come that way, I'm not quite sure how you distinguish who's in a bubble and who isn't. I mean, in Nova Scotia, you can have two families both in a bubble, even if they're not the same family. It's got to be difficult. I know a restaurant, the Old Triangle in Halifax, they said they're going to take people on the honor system because they have no way of telling who, when they attend the restaurant, is going to be in a bubble and who isn't.
Yeah, so true.
Just remember your bubble still counts towards your total figure, right? So if you're allowed 10 people and 2 families of 5 show up, that's it, you're done. It doesn't matter how many more you could squeeze in, you've reached the limit. Breakout room 27, Catherine, Hewitt, Kathy, and Mary Jo.
I think all of our questions have been already asked.
Thanks. Breakout room 28, Anne, Elizabeth, Florence, and Kenneth.
I guess I'll start.
You win. You got unmuted first.
I got unmuted first. We didn't really have too many questions. Some of them had already been covered, but it was more or less if there was a gradual reopening, there might be not that many people wanting to attend because of the possibility of COVID, and our congregation is an older congregation, so I think there'd be quite a few that would be hesitant to attend church. So is there, I guess it's basically waiting for the government to open the churches as far as the numbers go. Just an observation.
I wanted to just point out, I felt a little discouraged from pastoral care, and at the risk of sounding uncaring, but I really don't want to, I just want to point out that we can legally visit out of doors with 10 people. So why couldn't we visit out of doors with 1 or 2 people, keeping the physical distancing? I mean, to me, that's something I'm planning to do, because I have people who are starved for the face-to-face contact. And so I'm planning to do this. In fact, I'm planning to do it tomorrow. So I'm just going to be open about it, because I think that can be safely done. From everything I hear, 2 meters out of doors is safe. So if there's 2 or 3 of us, each 6 feet apart, I don't see why we couldn't do that. Convince me otherwise.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think you do, in the face of that compassion, the other thing you need to do is document your plan. How are we going to do pastoral care? Let us all understand the ways in which we will do pastoral care. If we're going to be visiting each other in person, how will we maintain the appropriate distance? Are we going to be wearing masks? How will we wash our hands? How will we be indoors or outdoors? And be clear and documented about how that's going to happen. It's not a question of finding a loophole. It's about describing your plan and being accountable for it. Group 29. Go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, so just, no, you don't sound like you're uncaring. And I hope we don't sound like we're uncaring when we suggest that it shouldn't happen yet. Because one of the things to think about is if you go visit somebody and then you go visit the next somebody and then you go visit the next somebody. So in the run of a day, you visited with 10, 12, 15 people, even though outside and social distancing, you've been exposed then to many others, and then you're exposing others to many others. And so that was the reason for suggesting that we not do that yet, just because as the minister, you might think I'm okay because I'm just visiting this person, but you're exposing yourself and everyone else to others, I guess, was the concern that we talked about today at the staff leaders.
Okay, thank you.
Group 29, Anne, Catherine, and Wendy. Do you have a comment or a question? I'm going to take a chance and move on. Interrupt me if one of you gets yourselves unmuted. Group 30, Michael, Peter, and Stuart. Comment or question?
I don't think we had a specific comment to bring when much of what's been discussed here we talked about. So.
Thanks, Michael. Group 31, Juanita, Kathy, Kevin Little, and Wanda. Any comments or questions?
I don't think we did.
Thanks, Kevin. And the last group, number 32, bingo. Chrissy, Cora, Ivan, and Randy. Did you have a comment or a question?
There was a lot of talk about plans and how things are set up and so on. And I think one of the biggest things we noted is there was large church and small church congregations there. And what a large church will have to do will be very different than what a small church will do, but yet the smaller congregations really almost need some support and assistance in figuring out exactly what it is they need to do. And I think Faith had talked about sending out the PowerPoint and possibly a tick box of don't forget to think about this, that, and the other thing. You know, obviously posting on your door everything you need to do, posting in the washroom how to wash hands, making sure supplies are available, and those are the key components that we really need to think about every time that we turn the corner.
Terrific. Thank you, Randy. So that's once through. So rather than go through everybody again, let me just take a chance now and say, did anybody have a remaining question left from your small group discussion that you wanted to make sure got asked? So just go carefully. Don't shout over each other. Just take your time one at a time, please.
So David. Vivian Morse, am I on?
Go ahead, Vivian.
I'm just wondering, we were talking about, of course, we know no singing in the church and anything like that. I know in New Brunswick, in my parents' home church, they've been doing, Kent has been doing outdoor services with people sitting in their cars. We haven't done anything. I'm still taping my services each week. But I'm just wondering, what about outdoor services? Outdoor services, if you have a large parking lot, would singing be allowed if someone stood off in the church entryway and other people were out in the parking lot? I'm just wondering about that, about an outdoor service. We're talking about what's happening in our churches, but I'm just wondering about an outdoor service, even if it's an opportunity for music and a little reflection. I don't know, just putting it out there.
Faith, you want to try that one?
Yeah, so I guess it's how, you know, can you set up your music and you're one person who can sing, because you can't have your singers together, right?
No.
And can you have them far enough apart and
Downwind,
because we're asked, like
Right.
we're asked to either keep your windows up so then you won't be able to hear unless you can put it through the
You can put it through the radio.
The FM station. And then people who are from the same household in the same car can sing their hearts out.
Right. Anyway, we haven't done anything. We haven't talked about it, but I'm wondering, people are, you know, you hear people, some are very cautious and others are a little antsy saying, when can we do it? Especially when we're talking about people who don't have the internet or Facebook, and people are feeling a little bit excluded. Although I have tried, but I can't get around to everyone or do it, but I've tried to at least type the message for some people who want it, and then they receive it in their mailbox. But I was just wondering about outdoor services, that's all.
Yeah, there's on the website for Nova Scotia, it does give a list of requirements for outdoor services. So have a look at that.
Okay.
Thanks, Valerie. Diana Prest raised your hand. So did you have a question or comment?
Well, my question or comment is, I haven't really heard anybody say anything about like Sunday school, because, you know, it's, you know, we're talking about managing adults with social distancing and stuff like and those certain things. But what happens, you know, when you have, I mean, the older youth or the older ones are easier, but when you have little ones that are used to, you know, running around, or even one in my group that we were talking about has a person with special needs, so, you know, is used to roaming around and around. Like, what are there going to be any guidelines for that?
Yeah, so one of the things that Dr. Strang did talk about was, let's talk to those who are doing daycares in our communities and see what they're doing, because some of their practices we may be able to use for our Sunday schools. And I don't know if Catherine is still on, because she's been doing some work around due diligence around children and youth ministries in this time of COVID. So I wonder if she's still there.
I'm still here.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, it's so hard, right? Because I have a kid myself, and, you know, the first thing he wants to do is hug everybody.
Right.
And I realize that kids don't all like to do that. But yeah, right now, I mean, the best thing you can do is make sure that if you are having Sunday school, that again, they're spaced apart the way they're supposed to be, that you try to have 2 teachers in the room with them to make sure that they stay spaced apart. Do things like don't share scissors, don't share glue, don't share, you know, common supplies, because going after kids' stuff with Lysol wipes, I mean, heavens, you'd be doing that all day. But yeah, and I guess with this, I mean, we're coming on the summer, right? So give some thought to, you know, is this the best time for your Sunday school or youth group to go back even? I realize that kids and youth are missing each other, but maybe start to think about, you know, have you been able to offer some Sunday school things online? Or are there, you know, could you gather them in a parking lot, like we said, with, you know, to wave at each other, or those kinds of things, but making sure that the parents or guardians are always, you know, kind of consulted, is the, because a lot of little kids too, believe it or not, are at in high-risk groups too, because they're asthmatic, they've got allergies, they've got, you know, all kinds of things, never mind that they're little petri dishes. But yeah,
we've been fortunate that ours has, you know, been contacting with email with the families and giving them things and stuff like that, and the youth do a Zoom meeting and that sort of thing. So those are good. I'm just thinking.
And then there's a whole, well, and I mean, this is a whole other talk probably, but there's, you know, there's certain duty of care things that we need to be mindful of when we're online with young people too. But again, that's a different that's a different Zoom meeting. I feel like it might be.
Yeah, I think my main concern is like once the doors do open, like when they come in, like how do you keep them safe and everyone else safe as well, right?
Yep, and making sure, and I know a lot of kids again don't like it or can't do it, but you know, try to, maybe some of the people in the congregation could make the masks out of fun material or something, like you know, my mom made my guy a Spider-Man one, so he thinks it's fun to wear, right? And maybe getting a gift like that from somebody in their church would entice them to wear it. I don't know. Just making sure that they follow, you know, that they follow the, and I mean, they're going to model the adults, right? So if adults follow good behavior and washing hands and wearing masks and all those kinds of things, hopefully the kids will too.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Great questions. And don't forget that the opportunity for asking questions doesn't end when we finish our Zoom here tonight. By all means, send questions to your regional staff people in their various areas of responsibility, and we'll do our best to respond. Anything else left remaining from your small group discussions that you wanted to be sure got heard before we move on?
David, are you also going to copy the chat box so that we can make sure we didn't miss anything? Or if there was something?
I was gonna give some instructions about that. Yes, thank you. So folks, the PowerPoint as a separate item and the recording of this Zoom as a separate item will be made available on the regional website through a link, and that link will also be distributed in the Wednesday email. So watch for that. There's a lot of good stuff happening in the chat, which I'll definitely save, but you can too. So if you're looking at the chat and looking at the bottom right-hand corner of the chat, there's a little box there with 3 dots in it, the ellipsis. I just learned that this week. 3 dots is an ellipsis, apparently. Who knew? Anyway, there's a box down there with 3 dots in it. If you click that box, it says, gives you the option of saving the chat. And there's been some good sharing of information in the chat, some links to articles and other information. So I would certainly encourage you to save the chat and go back through it to see what you might have missed, because I know I've missed plenty as it's gone by. So please take advantage of that. Don't panic. I'll leave lots of time at the end of the Zoom for you to be able to do that before we cancel the meeting. So watch out for that. Faith, a question that showed up in the chat just in the last couple of minutes would be any recommendations for people who have participated in rallies in the last week, protest marches and so on, where you've not had a lot of control about who gets too close to you. Should we be self-isolating after we've participated in a situation like that?
That's a very good question. We talked a little bit about it today, but nothing to say that people are asked to isolate. But certainly if you begin to have any symptoms at all, right away isolate and call 811. Some people I've spoken to that were at the rallies, they said that there was social distancing and people did have masks on, so hopefully people are safe if they did go.
Thanks, folks. I feel like we've caught pretty much everything else that's come along. There's been some really good exchanges about singing and organs and soft surface sterilization. Lysol 2-to-1 spray apparently is the answer to that. Family bubbles and so on. So I feel like we've caught pretty much everything. Is there anything left that you wanted to ask? Faith, are you pretty much wrapped up? Is there anything else you wanted to share before we finished?
No, I just thank you for everybody for staying with it and what you're doing in your congregations. It's not easy, and we're tired because everything we've had to do is new and different, and we're still being called to do that. So blessings, everybody. And if you have questions, as David said, send them along. And if we don't have the answers, we'll see if we can find them.
All right, folks, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to be with you tonight. And thank you for all your good questions and your sharing of information with each other, which is terrific. It's just a great example of being church together. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes to close out the meeting in case anybody wants to save the chat. Janet Sells, are you still with us? Would you offer a closing prayer, please, President Janet? No pressure.
Dear God, thank you for this opportunity tonight to meet together and to share our ideas. Keep us all safe in the days ahead and give us the wisdom that we need to proceed with caution. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks again, folks. See you all Wednesday night at the annual meeting, and watch for the weekly email with direction for how to access this material through web links. So go to the bottom of the chat, click the 3 dots, click save, and have a good night.